All right, let's get started. Hey everyone. So folks might be wondering what this stream is about. Some of you who are watching this on my YouTube channel might remember me as a YouTuber in the video game speedrunning community. I produced and published hundreds of tool-assisted speedruns, and for those who are not familiar with tool-assisted speedruns, this is basically when you program a bot to play a video game in the most optimal way possible. I had a moderate following. Last time I checked, I had about 6 million channel views and a little bit under 5,000 subscribers. Now I'm a full-time programmer, software engineer, and a cybersecurity professional. I'm incredibly thankful for the career I've had so far, and I am just really overjoyed. I have a great full-time job. I just finished authoring my first course for a major institution, which is being published next month. During the downtime that we have in this new world that we live in, I wanted to do something positive to help people gain new skills and learn more about technology. So I'm starting Tech Career Chat, a stream where I will play games and answer your questions about the tech industry and how to sharpen your skills. I was inspired to join the tech industry by playing video games growing up and learning how they work. So I hope you will be able to be inspired in the same way. This is also a great excuse for me to play video games and for me to revive my YouTube channel. So throughout, I will be doing some small lessons in computer science. For example, today we're playing Mega Man X, and after I beat a few levels, we'll be talking about the game's password encoding system. So without further ado, let's get into it. If you'd like to follow me on all the social media stuff, that information is here on the stream. Let's get started. So at any time, if you'd like to ask any questions, just add to the chat and I will chime in. I'll tell you a little bit about my background as a programmer to get started with. So I actually started programming because of games like Mega Man, really specifically Mega Man. I played these fan games by this guy, Damaged Games. He made this awesome series called Hard Hat, where you play as one of those little hard hat guys. I think they're called Mentors in reality. And you would play the game from his perspective. So you'd beat Robot Masters from his perspective. So I wanted to figure out who made this. Was this some like real company? Turned out that it was some random 18-year-old guy. And I said, you know, I'm a little bit younger at the time, but if this person could do it, why don't I try it myself? So I learned how to make video games with Mark Overmars' Game Maker, which was a lot of fun. And then I wanted to share them with all my friends because I thought they were really good games. They weren't. They were terrible. But I learned how to do web development through that process. From there, I started a forum. In that forum, I had to learn how to administrate various types of forum systems. I tried to learn my own. From there, I learned HTML, CSS, MySQL, PHP, all of those common programming languages, and that led me to where I am today, and I'm incredibly thankful for it. So that's kind of my background. So I'm hoping to inspire other folks to get into technology through video games as well. It's actually okay to take damage here because you'll see why in a second. So this boss battle is staged. Vile here cannot actually be defeated. It's here to make you feel hopeless. It's a really interesting design choice. Many of you may have watched the episode of Sequelitis, sorry, mixed it up with the JavaScript ORM. Sequelitis, where they talk about how this is really awesome for the narrative. Definitely check it out if you'd like. It is there's quite a bit of swearing there, and I'm trying to keep this channel to be family friendly, but if you'd like, it's a pretty interesting episode. He talks about how this sets you up to think that you want to one day become Zero. And the entire game's about building up to that point where you can be as powerful as Zero. All All right, with that out of the way, let's fight our first boss, Chill Penguin. So, one thing that's awesome about Mega Man is you can theoretically take any route. The game allows you to play it in a non-linear fashion, which at the time was pretty revolutionary. But for Mega Man X specifically, it's really advisable that you start out with Chill Penguin, and you'll see why. The upgrade that you get in this level is so valuable for speed purposes that every speedrunner, not that I'm claiming to be one, I'm not doing great right now, will start this level first, even though they theoretically could start with any level. Whoops. This is a surprisingly hard to catch ledge. My goodness. See, this wouldn't even be an issue if I had the dash boots. So I'm looking forward to getting them in approximately 20 seconds. Hey all, thanks for joining. I'm playing Mega Man X, and I'm talking about my experiences in the tech industry. So if you have any questions for me, just feel free to mention them in the chat, and I'll respond as soon as I can. So I just got the dash boots, which allow me to go really fast. Kind of an essential thing for any run of this game. But it also means I'm going to get hit a lot more, I'm sure. All you see is a black screen. Oh no, that's not good. Can you refresh the page? It seems like the stream's working. I'm watching in real time. Try refreshing the page. Do you hear it? Oh, you see it now? Awesome. Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened there. So to get the conversation going, it's still black, huh? Is anybody else having issues seeing it? Or are you on a mobile device or are you on a website? There is a mobile app for this. You can also get an app for, I think, basically any smart TV to watch Twitch, but I see the video going, so I think it has to be on your end, unfortunately. Can you hear me? Okay, well, best of luck with that. Let me know if that gets resolved. Sorry about that. So, to get the conversation started, a lot of people who are getting into development ask me, what language should I learn? What languages should I learn? And I think it's important to understand that you don't want to start out your career as a software engineer learning every language under the sun. It is a very overly hyped concept to say, oh, I know C++, Java, JavaScript, C#, Pizza, Malbolge, other esoteric languages that no one actually writes anything in. And this is not a good idea for a myriad of reasons. Number one is that when you are developing in, let's say, Java, the concepts that you learn are very applicable to other languages. Basically, any imperative language is very similar in most cases. You still have if statements, you still have variables, you have loops. Now, there are some key differences between the languages, such as Java has strong types, which is not common in, let's say, Python or JavaScript. But, you still get those fundamental, bare-bones necessities. So I would recommend learning one language and sticking with it for quite some time. Now, if you had to have me say one language over all other languages in terms of pure practicality right now, I would say JavaScript is a great language to learn for practicality purposes. Now, why do I say that? Well, JavaScript is the only language that your browser understands natively. That's a very important concept. So your browser understands a handful of languages and only one programming language. So you have HTML, which basically structures the format of the page, the skeleton of the page. You have CSS, which defines the style of that skeleton. And then you have JavaScript, which actually allows you to program. It allows you to execute logic and move around aspects of the page to respond to certain events, such as clicks or button presses. For example, you would not be able to watch this video right now if it wasn't for JavaScript. And the controls certainly would not exist without JavaScript. So JavaScript is very useful in that regard. Now, you might be saying, well, I can run it in the browser, so don't I still need to learn a language to run code on a desktop or a server? And that used to be the case, but it's not the case anymore. So now you can run JavaScript on a server using Node.js, and you can run JavaScript on your desktop using a program called Electron. By the way, this would be a great time to ask questions. This boss is a total cakewalk. So for that reason, you can learn JavaScript and use it basically everywhere. I spoke too soon about this boss. If I get the rhythm right, he's like a joke. If I screw up the rhythm even once, it's gonna kill me. Oh, and that's what I did. Oh no. Okay, forgive me. Forgive me. I'm still getting used to this multitasking thing. Okay. So that's why I think JavaScript's probably the most useful language for you to learn. Now, that being said, a lot of people will probably tell you, and accurately so, that JavaScript is not a particularly good language or easy to learn language. It really depends on what your goals are. If you want to learn how to do something practical, JavaScript is the way to go. That may not be necessarily the best language to start with. So something to consider is starting with a language that's easier to learn and then pivoting to JavaScript. One language I would strongly recommend is Python. Python is one of the easiest languages to get used to for a handful of reasons. One is that there's no strong typing. You can use a variable for multiple purposes. There is forced indentation, which means you have to indent your code in a particular way in order for it to run properly. We got our first question. So Immoblicy says, does JavaScript have a native way to build a GUI or interact with one? Because I learned some basic stuff in C++ recently, and I realized that it had no native GUI things, and then I had to use QMake. So JavaScript in the web interacts with HTML and CSS. So in order to create a GUI for a website, you just need to know HTML and CSS. And basically what JavaScript does is it transforms your document such that the items on the screen move around based on your programming logic. So that's one reason why JavaScript's fairly accessible, is you don't need to learn something like OpenGL, for example. Your browser does a lot of the rendering for you. Now, if you want to do a desktop application and you want to use Electron.js, I believe you can still use markup, but you don't have to. I think that they allow you to have flexibility to do anything that you'd want to do in a normal desktop application. I'm not positive how robust it is, though, because I have not really used Electron outside of, just experimentation purposes, because honestly, nowadays, most things can be done in the web. And if you can do it in the web, why create a standalone desktop application? It's more likely to be adopted if it's a web application or an app that utilizes a web application. So I hope that answers your question. If you have any follow-ups, I'm happy to go into more details. So this is a fun scene in terms of illustrating how lag can exist in a video game. You can see how there are all these robot birds, and as a result, the screen slows down. That's because this is a 16-bit system. It had a limit to the amount of images it could render at one time. So, yeah, let's give them a break. It's from the early 90s. Awesome. No, if you already know HTML and CSS, JavaScript is absolutely a natural next step, because you already know how to design a web page. Now you just need to know how to move around that web page using a programming language. Now, important to know two things with relation to JavaScript and the web. One is that if someone asks you what your favorite programming language is, you are not allowed to answer HTML or CSS. And the reason why you can't say that is because HTML and CSS are technically markup languages. And a lot of people are elitists about programming, and they're going to say, oh, you don't even know the terminology. You just, are a script kiddie. Well, they're both languages, just one is to design a page and one of them is to execute formal logic. So they're just different use cases. Another thing that's important is that JavaScript is not Java. This is one of the most confusing things in my industry, and people get it wrong all the time, is that Java is a completely different language than JavaScript. Now you may wonder, what? How is that even possible? How could they be named so similarly and not be related? Well, they're tangentially related. Basically, the JavaScript developers wanted to copy Java because of its immense popularity. So they named it JavaScript, and the name stuck. So, yeah, that's unfortunate. So, when you're saying I'm trying to learn web development, don't say I'm learning Java. Now, if you're learning Java to run servers, okay, technically you're right. But people, again, this industry is unfortunately full of elitists, and they're willing to make fun of you at any turn. So, terminology is important to get right, especially in that first interview, because that's a huge red flag. Is if I'm hiring for a web development position and you say, oh, I know Java, that's like what my bread and butter is, I'll be saying, well, okay, are you planning on only doing server-side development? Because if so, sounds good. Otherwise, you may not be the best person for this job. Am I going to use my sub-tank or not? Is it even worth it, or am I going to die from the sky? It's worth it. Let's go for it. Yes, absolutely. HTML and CSS are just formatting. They're two different parts of the formatting puzzle. HTML is for structure, CSS is for the design surrounding that structure. If you're liking the stream, please follow me on all the social media things to the left, and tell your friends. The more of an audience that I have, the more often I'll do this. I'm happy to play video games and talk about technology whenever, but it can get a little upsetting to talk to myself. But thanks for the awesome questions so far. I hope to do this at least every Saturday, but if there's a demand, I'd love to do it more. Okay, it appears that there might be some lag in the video. Am I the only one experiencing this, or is this, Okay, I just had to refresh the page. Okay. Let me know if there's any video or audio issues. I'm still getting used to this setup, so just let me know if there's any issues. I think part of the issue might be because I'm downloading and uploading at the same time. It might be straining my internet. So another topic that I discuss a lot with folks is about technical resumes. Now, depending on where you're at, this may not be relevant, but hopefully it will eventually be relevant to you. I've read a lot of good resumes, and I've read a lot of bad resumes in the technical field. So if you're a computer science student in college, it's okay to show some of your past experience because, you know, people understand you're a new graduate out of college, and unfortunately, there is a certain amount of advantage that you have over boot camp grads inherently. Even though I've worked for boot camps and I've learned a lot from them, and I've taught a lot of great students from them. There is definitely an advantage if you can afford it to have that technical degree. The reason I bring this up is because if you don't, that doesn't mean don't go for it. What it means is you should tailor your strategy a little bit differently. So a lot of folks will give all of these experiences on their resume because they have work experience. They've been working for 10 years prior to going the boot camp route. And that's awesome. That doesn't mean that all of your experience is relevant. It does not mean that all of your experience is necessarily relevant because, you know, they're hiring for technical skills. So if you mention experience like, you know, being a bartender or a waiter or waitress, there's nothing wrong with that, but you may want to eliminate that from your resume, especially if you have a bunch of other things that you want to talk about, such as your projects in your boot camp or about other valuable experience like clubs and extracurriculars or charity work that you do. The big reason I mention this is because people sometimes debate whether or not you should have 1 or 2 pages or more pages to your resume. I am really adamant about this, and I really respectfully disagree with anybody who says otherwise. When you are going for your first job out of a boot camp or out of college, you have a single-page resume, period. You cannot argue that you have enough experience to justify 2 pages at that point. I still use a 1-page resume. Not that I'm looking for a job, but I try to keep it updated just because that's a generally good practice so you don't forget, you know, your experience, and, you know, you can have it in case there's a downturn and there's a layoff, etc. But you need to make sure that you are using 1 page for your first application because you simply do not have enough technical experience to justify 2 pages. And recruiters are not going to be looking at your resume for that long. They're going to be looking at it for a couple minutes tops, probably less. So it's a really good idea to say less is more and keep it to a single page. Now, you should plug everything that's relevant in that single page. You should talk about leadership experience, project management experience. All of that is relevant to what you're trying to do. But if you're trying to stretch out the length for the purposes of padding out a resume, that's the opposite of what you should be doing, in my opinion. Okay, got another question. Good resources. So I'm a big fan of Code Academy from the perspective of just getting started. It has a lot of great tutorials on JavaScript, on Python, on Bash command line programming, and that's super important as well. When you're working with computers, you need to understand how to use the command line. And the reason why that is there's a lot of tools that developers use that do not have graphical user interfaces. No, I can't go for the heart, Wes. You'll see why in a second. I'm not going for that. You really need to have the scissors to get that. There's no way you could get that without the scissors. No way. So I'm a big fan of Code Academy. For starters, I think that there are other pretty good resources. So my current work is in cybersecurity, so I can speak a lot more to that now as I fumble with these platforms. So I teach for the SANS Institute. They're a phenomenal organization with regards to cybersecurity. They're, I think, the definitive resource on cybersecurity, and they have a lot of great free, a lot of great free resources at sans.org/free to learn about security. You can look up webcasts on security, including some that I've done. You can get free posters and tools and cheat sheets. So that's what I would definitely say for cybersecurity. For programming writ large, I think Code Academy is a great place to start. And then honestly, just Stack Overflow is such an important part of any developer's job. Don't let any developer tell you that they don't use Stack Overflow. They're lying. It's a huge part of your job is knowing what terms to search for and then searching for them and then applying what you find to the solution. Did you have any more specific questions about resources? What kinds of resources you're looking for? Okay, so we are 5 bosses down. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the password system used in this game. Let me really quickly read this message. I know Git and a few other small fry Linux scale command line stuff. Yeah, Code Academy has a lot of great lessons with regards to Bash. Definitely a great place to start. Definitely a great place to start to expose you to some of those technologies. Okay, let's change things up a little bit and let's talk a little bit about this password system here. So before we talk about this password system specifically, we need to understand what encoding is generally. Encoding simply means to take a set of data that's represented in one form and to transform it into an alternative form. Encoded data theoretically can be decoded. So what this password system is really doing is it's taking data about your game, encoding it in these 12 digits of numbers, and then when you plug them into the password system, it's decoding it into the game state that you've currently achieved. Perhaps the most famous encoding system is DNA. DNA is a chain of different types of acids that define your genetic traits. Biologists can look at a certain DNA pattern and say with certainty, or a certain level of certainty, that that encoding relates to a certain trait in an animal or a human being or any living organism, I believe, has some form of this encoding. Conversely, they can observe traits and accurately predict the corresponding DNA encoding. So that's a complicated encoding system, but hopefully gives you an idea of what we're trying to do here with encoding. Another related concept that you should be aware of is encryption. Encryption is not encoding. Encoding is not encryption. When you encode a string of data, you are expected to be able to decode that string of data. When you encrypt a string of data, it is more or less impossible to reverse that process unless you have what is called a cryptographic key. So the use case for encoding is completely different than that of encryption. Here, we want to represent some data about our game. We're not trying to keep anything secret. We want to tell the game, take these numbers and determine where I'm at within the game. And we'll see the specifics of how that works in just a moment. Another concept that you should be aware of is compression. If you've been working with computers for a while, you're familiar with compression. Think about a .zip file. This is a compressed volume containing one or more files. Compression is simply when you encode data in such a way that the resulting output is smaller than the input. When we zip up files, we get a smaller file than the sum of all of the individual files. Then we can uncompress that file or decode it into its original form. So now that we have some terminology set, let's talk about this particular encoding system. Thankfully, someone has done a lot of the work for me already. Here's an excellent guide from, at this point, over 12 years ago, from Ultra Bongo, which talks about the Mega Man X password guide. I'm not going to get into all of the specifics, but what I do want to talk about is I want to talk about what data are we encoding here. So there are 24 different variables that this game is tracking of yours. So that's all about what progress you've made. It's not keeping track of specifically where you are on a stage. It's keeping track of what major events have you accomplished. Which bosses have you beat? Which items have you collected? Which heart containers, which upgrades, etc. So it's encoding those 24 variables into this 12-digit string. So how does it do this? Well, you can read the details if you'd like in that document, but before we get into the specifics of how it works, I'd rather show you what it looks like when we encode some data in the password system in the first place. So let me check some of the boxes here on this screen that relate to the things that I've accomplished. So what did I do? I defeated Armored Armadillo, I got his heart tank, I got his sub tank. I defeated Launch Octopus, I got his heart tank. I defeated Chill Penguin, I did not get the heart tank, I got the leg capsule. I defeated Spark Mantle and got the heart tank, and I defeated Boomer Clanger. And now I could generate this password. And unfortunately, this password does not exactly match the password that I have in this game. The last time I tested this, it did have the same password. But one potential reason for why this is the case is that in Mega Man X, there are so many more passwords that can be generated as opposed to the amount of data we're trying to represent. So when we encode our passcode, we are actually decompressing those 24 variables. Because think about it mathematically. We have 12 digits here from 1 to 9, okay? So if you do the math, and this is some math you might not be familiar with, that means that there is 9 to the 12th power passwords that can be generated with such a system. That is approximately 282 billion passwords. Now let's compare that to the data we're trying to represent in this password system. That's 2 to the 24, because we have 2 possibilities for each of these variables. They're either true or false. They are binary values. They are Booleans. So if you do 2 to the 24, that gets you 16 million. So there are far more passwords than there are possible values that you can store in the game, that you can decode into a game state. So it is very probable that there are multiple passwords that will give you the same game state. So you may want to learn more about how this works, and you may not want to read this long guide. This gets into the conversation we had earlier about JavaScript. What if you want to examine a web page and how it works? Well, fortunately for us, this is completely powered by JavaScript. Now, one way you can detect this is notice that whenever I change a value and I click generate, notice that this refreshes without the entire page refreshing. That is a great sign that the logic is being handled on the browser side, that it's being handled in JavaScript. So that means that the code is exposed to us. It's not being processed by a server, it's being processed by the browser. So what that means is if we right-click this page and click View Page Source, I know you can't see that for some reason, but if you click View Page Source, we will see this code. Now this looks pretty ugly, but we can take this code and put it into a JavaScript beautifier, and this will take the code and put it in a human-readable format with all of the indentations, etc. And we can see basically what's going on. We have 24 variables that we're trying to represent about the game state. We have whether or not we beat Armored Armadillo, whether or not we beat Launch Octopus, whether or not we beat Chill Penguin, etc., which heart containers we got, which capsules we got, and which storage sub-tanks we got. And using this, it's going to look at those variables, and it's going to fill out each box with one of 4 values. And that's something that's, actually, I guess it's one of 8 values. It's really bizarre. But you'll notice that a lot of these passwords, when I generate them, the vast majority of the ones in the top left are either a 4 or a 1. Let's see. Let me get back to that state. Okay, let me start from scratch. The demo gods are not being very nice to me. Typically speaking, you will either always have a 1 in the top left or a 4. And then there are some conditions in which it will change over. Instead of using a 1 or 4, it will instead use a 3, a 5, an 8, or a 6. So there are very few passwords that are actually going to be generated by the system in terms of variance in the numbers. So you can learn more about this if you want to read the code and repeat the process that I just did, or if you want to read the documentation. But the important takeaways is that we are encoding the state of the game into these 12 digits that in turn translate to 24 binary values that determine how far along we've gotten in the game. So that's our mini computer science lesson. So checking the chat. Awesome. Okay, let me know if you have any questions about that discussion. If not, let's get back into the game. Okay, Sting Chameleon time. So for those who are just joining now, welcome. Thanks for joining me. This is a stream where I'm going to be playing some video games, and I'm going to be talking about my experience in the tech industry and about how I learned how to program and how I learned some cybersecurity concepts. So if you enjoy this, please follow me on Twitch and subscribe to my YouTube channel where I will be uploading all these archives. The more people join these streams, the more often I will do these streams. I want to make sure that I'm creating good content, and good content, I think, is generated by having some good questions. So if I can get a following every day, I'll stream every day. For starters, I'm going to probably just stream maybe once a week, every Saturday at around 1 o'clock CST. My goal for next week is to stream a game called Link's Awakening. So you probably heard about Link's Awakening. They had a major remake this past year. It's my favorite Zelda game of all time. It's phenomenal, and it's so technically impressive. When you think about the hardware they were working with back in the early 90s to make a game of that quality with, with that hardware, and to make a game almost as good as, Link to the Past, in my opinion, is truly remarkable. I'm glad that you mentioned that. So I'm going to be playing the original game for that exact reason. There are so many glitches that I want to talk about in that game, and that's why I'm going to be playing the original black and white Link's Awakening next week, so I can show you all the glitches that I played around with when I was a kid and the implications they have for computer programming. For a sneak preview, the main glitch that exists in that game is you basically can stop the transitions in between screens. So let's say you go from one room to another room. You can terminate that transition by pressing select, and as a result, you end up on the next screen, but you end up in the same position that you started in. So if you go downward, you'll end up on the bottom of the next screen. And using this, you can do all sorts of crazy stuff. I'm going to get to level 8 in approximately 3 minutes of that game next week. And yes, you can also do arbitrary code execution, just like with Pokemon, which is really cool. So I mentioned earlier that I have a YouTube channel that I have not done anything within a decade, and that's part of why I want to get back into this. So if you go to my YouTube channel, there's an awesome video that I encoded by this tool assistant speedrunner named Bob Mario 211. And maybe it's not 211, maybe it's 511. It's Bob Mario something. And he plays that game for an hour using a robot, and he shows off all the crazy glitches. So if you'd like to learn more about that before next week to see what a non-human can do with that game, check it out. It's on my channel. Now might be a good time to talk a little bit about my tool-assisted speedrun history. So tool-assisted speedruns are actually very educational when it comes to learning about programming and learning about cybersecurity and reverse engineering. So a tool-assisted speedrun, for those who don't know, this is a speedrun in which you have a robot that plays the game for you. So you basically tell the robot what buttons to press and when, and they're able to play perfectly as a result. So you'll see Pokemon being beaten in 1 minute is one of the craziest records that tool-assisted speedruns have. So why is this educational? Well, in order to do things like that, you need to understand how a lot of these glitches operate. You need to understand how random numbers are generated. If you're not going to use a glitch, you need to know how to ensure the best possible outcome happens in your game. So that requires a certain amount of reverse engineering of the game. So I got involved with tool-assisted speedruns in about 2010. I did a lot of encoding. So what I did was I took the tool-assisted speedrun scripts and I replayed them on the hardware such that I could show the result and make a YouTube video where you can actually watch it without having the game. So that was a lot of fun. I also did a couple speedruns on my own. The main one that I did, one that I would recommend, is I did one of Spider-Man and X-Men's Arcade's Revenge. It was a really fun game to speedrun. It's a terrible game to play, by the way. Terrible game to play. But it was a really fun game to speedrun. I did the tool-assisted speedrun for that game. I believe we finished the game in 20-something minutes. And the coolest part about it is because you have unlimited time, and you have, this robot that plays perfectly. What I did was, during those auto-scrollers, those levels where you have to wait for some transition to happen, I would do interesting things. And one thing that I did with Gambit's stage is Gambit is an auto-scroller where it scrolls upward on this elevator, and you have to wait for it to complete in order to get to the boss. So I used that opportunity, and by training with the drums, I played drum kit. I used that in order to make a level in which you basically have Gambit drumming to the rhythm using his cards. So he'll throw cards against metal surfaces to make a bass drum sound, to make a snare drum sound, and other surfaces to make a bass drum sound. So I got a shout out for that on Awful Games Done Quick one summer. And for better or for worse, it's probably going to be the thing that I'm remembered for one day, because for some reason that got a lot of attention. And, programming is a lot of fun, but unless you're doing a lot of cool open source things, you don't necessarily get the glamour from that experience. People want entertainment stuff. So, but it was a lot of fun. I did it with this guy, Jay's Mad, this awesome guy. He did the Spider-Man and the Storm and Cyclops levels. I did the Gambit and Wolverine levels. So check that out if you're interested in seeing what a tool-assisted speedrun can do. I will probably not play Spider-Man X-Men's Arcade's Revenge for this stream, just because that game is really hard and not particularly fun. But it's got the best soundtrack of basically any game out there. I mean, Mega Man X is an amazing soundtrack, and I'm saying that while one of the best songs in video game history is being played. But, Spider-Man X-Men's Arcade's Revenge, I think you could argue has at least equally quality music. At least equal in quality. Thank you, I appreciate the positive feedback. So, someone mentioned arbitrary code execution. Might as well talk a little bit about that, because it's really interesting. So, in some games are so broken from a programming perspective, you can overwrite part of the game's memory. So basically, a game cartridge has a couple components. It has, game cartridge actually really just has the game loaded on it. And then your system has memory for a variety of purposes. It has memory for the current game state, it has memory for the programming of the actual game, and those things typically don't mix. You typically have your code memory, and you have your game memory. Those things typically don't mix. When they mix, you can get arbitrary code execution, and this is where you overwrite the code of the game to be able to run arbitrary commands via the game, just by pressing certain buttons. So Pokemon has this, Link's Awakening has this, Super Mario World and Super Mario 3 have this. Those are some examples of games with arbitrary code execution. So someone literally took Pokemon and using arbitrary code execution programmed in the song to Portal at the end, for example. Someone took Super Mario World and put the game Snake in Super Mario World. And this is because you can literally replace the code with anything. Link's Awakening, someone actually embedded a episode, or not an episode, but a clip from SpongeBob into the game, which is incredible because it was a Game Boy game. And they almost got into trouble for that, but luckily they were able to keep the run up. So you can do some wild things with arbitrary code execution. So why does this relate to your tech career? Well, you can have the same problems in your code. So let's say you made an application that allowed the user to trick the code into thinking that the user's data was actually code. Well, now you can run arbitrary code on that user's system or that server. You can do some awful things with that, and that's, basically every breach that you've heard of, like Equifax, their breach was a result of this bad library that they used called Apache Struts. There was this old version of Apache Struts that they ran, and it had a remote code execution vulnerability. And that's what resulted in every single one of your social security numbers being stolen. So this has some real implications. Now, if I can run arbitrary code on your Game Boy, who cares? Your Game Boy doesn't have any sensitive data on it. Your Game Boy doesn't have, internet access. It can't pivot to other things in the network. But that arbitrary code execution in a real application can be absolutely devastating. So think about command injection, where you are able to inject actual bash commands by providing user data. And think about SQL injection, where you inject database commands by providing certain data. If you'd like to see an example of command injection, I did a demonstration of command injection for a webcast that I did. If you look it up, it's from the SANS Institute. If you look up on the SANS Cloud Security YouTube, which I linked from my YouTube channel to, and you look up attacking serverless servers, you'll see what I mean about command injection and about other similar vulnerabilities. So I went on a slight tangent. Another thing I wanted to mention about tool-assisted speedruns is not only that you have to decode the game in order to do them, but you also might want to create scripts that teach you about the game, that look at the memory and give you real-time analytics about how you're doing. So I'll give you an example with relation to X-Men Spider-Man Arcade's Revenge. So anybody who's played that game and has had the patience to get to Juggernaut will know exactly what I'm talking about. Juggernaut seemed like the hardest boss of all time, because you would slash him with your claws over and over again, and he would seemingly make no progress. There are some videos that you can watch of people playing this and just going crazy. And I was able to beat him in like 2 minutes. Why was I able to beat him in 2 minutes? I learned by using a script that certain attacks were actually useless against Juggernaut given the circumstances, and your claws were one of them. You could slash him 1,000,000 times and do 0 damage until the very end. Now, why did they program it this way? I'm not really sure. I think they try to make it, dramatic, because you can only kill Juggernaut at the end of the stage. Kind of cool. But I wouldn't have learned that if I didn't know Lua scripting. So I used Lua scripting to create an overlay for my game to show me all of the enemies' hitboxes and what their health was. And I'm going to get one more sub-tank before we get into Sigma. And using that, I was able to determine, wow, this strategy that we've been taking to beat this boss is completely invalid. And it blew a lot of people's minds who played that game. So if you check that out and you'd like to learn more about how the speedrun was built and what concepts we exploited from a programming perspective and otherwise, we actually have subtitles for that speedrun. So looking at the speedruns, the post-captioning, you can learn about how we actually accomplished what we did. And I went into a lot of detail about that boss battle. It was ridiculous. Okay, now we're in the home stretch. Time to fight Sigma. So, I remember this game well enough to be able to do pretty well on the intro stages. I will probably do fine with everybody up until Sigma's last form. That's why I got these sub-tanks, because Sigma's last form, the way I remember it, is pretty difficult. But I'll do the best I can. The levels up to that point should be just fine. So remember, we're here to talk about technology and for me to stream while I do it. But if you're here just for video games, that's fine too. But if you're interested in learning more about programming, I'm hoping that this can be an interactive an interactive dialogue while I flounder with these platforms. So feel free to add some questions. Oh no! Okay, to add some questions into the chat, and I'll be happy to answer any that I have. That was miserable. How many lives do I have? I have 2. Okay, I won't restart. Another thing that's interesting that I'll mention, because this reminds me of it, is I love how in old games you have this life marker, and it says you have 2 lives. But what it really means is that after you die, it'll replenish you 2 more times. So you actually have 3 lives. There'll be a time where it'll show 0 lives remaining because there's no one to replace you, which is interesting. Some games do it that way. Some games say that it's, you know, if you have 1 life, that is actually your last life. Can be very confusing. The reason why I want to mention this is we talked about memory in your game state. And usually, we represent our game state using some interface. We show how much life you have, for example, and how many lives you have. Some games don't do that. Some games, this may be one or may not be one. I'm not positive, but one that I can definitely remember is Battletoads. If you get more than the 6 lives that are showing, you'll continue to accumulate lives, but it won't actually show you that you've made any progress. So you can end up having, like, I think, like 15-something lives without, you know, it showing. So you have to wonder, you know, what is the limit to the number of lives you have? And inevitably, there is some limit. I don't know what that limit is offhand, but there is some limit. And the reason why that is because in games, you have a limited set of memory, right? So let me introduce this concept for those who don't know. We talked a little bit about binary earlier. Binary is one number system that allows you to represent data in a very efficient way for computers, because computers can represent binary with electrical signals, on or off. So let's talk about the amount of memory that you have in a game. This is a 16-bit game, and that means that most memory addresses... Oh yeah, I have to do the same thing as I did in the first stage. Most memory addresses store 16 bits. Now, what is a bit? A bit is a 0 or a 1. So 16 bits represents possibility of 2 to the 16 different numbers. So it can represent a number between 0 and I think it's 65,520, no, 65,535, I think is the number. So if we have a 16-bit number, we can say reliably that if we go over that number, we're going to either not go over that number, we're going to cap out at that number, so there'll be some logic in the game that says if you get more lives than are allowed, we are just not going to increment your life counter. Or we can do what's called an underflow. So when you go past the limit of the number, it will end up zeroing out all of those binary digits. And as a result, you will have 0 lives at that point. So there's a lot of interesting glitches that result from that implication. I know there's one with Pokemon where you can get negative experience, and with negative experience, you can level up to level 100 in one round, because it'll underflow. So I got the terminology wrong. Underflow is to go under 0 to wrap around to the top number, whereas overflow is to go past the top number and either go back down to 0 or to a negative number, depending on the type of data you're working with, whether or not that data is signed or unsigned. Those are 2 different types of numbers you can work with. So, fun tangent that came to mind because I saw my lives. So. This part's really hard to do without the chameleon power-up. So now I can charge my weapon and do special effects with that weapon. So I can be invincible if I charge it up. I didn't know that there was an arbitrary code execution in Pokemon Generation 3. I knew about 2 and 1. I didn't know about 3. That's cool. I would love to play Pokemon on stream and talk about the missing no glitch, but that might be a little bit too long for me. Unless I do the memory corruption glitch, and then I can beat the game in 1 minute. So I guess that is technically an option. Yeah, this is not gonna cut it. I'm just gonna start over. I have extra lives. These are fun patterns to follow, but I always get it wrong. Even though I know logically this should be really easy, I always mess up. Okay, that guarantees he's going to be in that island right there. Okay, he's going to end up on the... Nope, got it wrong. So feel free, in addition to asking questions about technology and cybersecurity, feel free to chat about games or make suggestions for games I should play in the future. I have a couple different ideas. Like I mentioned, next week I hope to play Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. I hope to play some live chess at some point, because I play a lot of chess. I'm very bad at it, which is unfortunate. But, you know, might as well, you know, provide some entertainment from my misery with it, instead of just soloing alone. Oh my goodness, that was inexcusable. Well, I think I have 0 lives left, which is perfect. So, as you can see, I have 0 lives left, which means I will not get a new life to generate when I die. And now I have my lives back. So you'll notice from that password discussion from before that there are no variables for the Sigma stages. And there's a very good reason for that. If you beat a Sigma stage, the game does not track that progress. And that means that if I powered off my game right now and I typed in that password, I would have to beat the first Sigma stage again. So it does not track all of your game state. Well, it certainly couldn't. I mean, think about, how big are these cartridges? I think it's like 128 kilobytes. When you think about 128 kilobytes, that's, it's like 100... One second. I'm being very poor at math right now. So 1 kilobyte is 1,000 bytes. So that means... What am I doing? So that means 128 kilobytes is 128,000 bytes. Think about how much data is stored with 128,000 bytes. That's 2 to the 128,000 different numbers that can be represented. You can't represent that in the password system. Impossible. That's why all of these password systems are going to be representing a subset of the data that is available. And that's why we don't use passwords anymore. We have save states and save files, because it's trivial for the computer to plug in all of that data. It's incredibly annoying for a human being to plug in all that data. And that's really what a save file is doing. It's plugging in a password representing all of your current state just really, really fast. That's basically what it's doing. Guy. I like these mechs, but part of me gets really impatient because of all the lag that they generate. They've got a lot of moving parts. You better believe that Mega Buster shot is hard to render. I can sing this game's praises for hours and hours and hours, but one of my favorite things about this boss rush setup is in the original game, well, not Mega Man 1. Mega Man 1 actually was more in line with this, but Mega Man 2 through 7, they would give you this boss rush where you can fight these bosses by teleporting to one or another and fight them sequentially. That can get kind of old. I like how in this game you encounter the bosses in an order while you're playing the level. So you don't have just one boss rush, you have it over time across these 3 Sigma levels. I believe it's 3. Oh my goodness. I don't remember exactly what is useful against this boss, but I think it's Tornado. Okay. Not the most accurate run so far. But I'm not here to speedrun. I'm here to talk tech and have a good time. Still new to the Twitch scene, so I know that there are donations that you could do here. I definitely don't expect that, or I'm even asking that from individuals. you know, I really just appreciate the opportunity to hang out with you all and talk technology, which is my passion. Though I will mention that there is a free subscription you can give out once a month via Amazon Prime. It's the sub with Prime. And while I'm definitely not asking folks to give up their hard-earned money for my stupid little video game stream, I sure do not mind taking any or all of Jeff Bezos' money. So feel free to do that. But the main thing that oh gosh, I hate this part. I hate this part. Oh my goodness. Am I gonna need to use the storage tank? Yep, use it, use it. Phew! But what I would definitely appreciate is follows, subscription to the YouTube, all of those social media stuff. I'm hoping that this can be a cool little educational forum where we can learn and have a good time. I'm also hoping eventually to have some of my coworkers on as guests because I'm very fortunate to work with a lot of really smart people who also love video games. So yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch some video games and talk technology on a Saturday. It means a lot to me. Whoops, wrong weapon. Thank you, I appreciate it. We're in the final stretch of the game. Phew! Whoops. Okay. I really need some health for my sub-tanks, so... Oh, darn it. What's frustrating about the sub-tanks in this game is, unless you have full health, it will not distribute your energy to your sub-tanks. So, it's been a long while since I've streamed, I think about 10 years, so I'm still getting used to the new Twitch interface, and one thing that's very interesting and or perplexing to me is, you know, I see the sub count or the viewer count go up, go down, and I don't know if it's new people or if it's the same folks dropping and joining for technical reasons or because they had to step away. So for those who are new, if there are any new people in this group, well, welcome. First of all, thanks for taking the time to talk tech and watch me play video games on a Saturday. It means a lot to me. This channel is all about me chatting with the audience about my experience in the tech industry. I've been a programmer for quite some time, professionally for about 13 years, as a hobbyist for more like 15, 16. You know, I was inspired to get into video games I was inspired to get into programming thanks to video games. And I'm hoping to use this time while everybody's you know, unfortunately home because of this horrible, horrible pandemic to provide some informative entertainment. So if you have any questions about programming or the tech industry, you've wanted to learn to code but you don't know where to start, I'd love to help answer those questions. I should have probably mentioned this earlier, but I also teach. I teach for the Vanderbilt University Coding Bootcamp as a substitute instructor occasionally, which is a part of the Trilogy Network, which is a subsidiary of 2U, very large publicly held company in the education space. They're on the stock market, which is pretty cool. They acquired Trilogy about 3 months into my time with Vanderbilt. Unfortunately, no equity, so I didn't get any of that awesome equity. But it was a cool experience, and I also teach cybersecurity for the SANS Institute. The SANS Institute is a great resource for learning about cybersecurity. I want to plug one thing in particular of theirs that I'm really proud to be associated with. They have this new summer camp for teens about cybersecurity, and it's completely free. It's 2 days in August. So if, I forget the exact age range, I think it's like 12 to 18. If you or anybody you know is in that range who's interested in learning about hacking and cybersecurity and how to protect yourself from bad guys on the internet, check it out. The great thing is it's not just like, you know, a camp sponsored by SANS. They're actual high-quality instructors teaching, you know, these concepts. I think it's really awesome, and you know, I hope to be involved with the next one of them. I have a conflict this year, but I really am so proud to be involved with that. One of my first experiences in programming was actually at a tech camp myself. I was part of, I went to ID Tech Camp at Vassar College when I was somewhere between, I think I went from 14 to 17. And then I also was an instructor / counselor for the camp at Vanderbilt when I was in college. So I'm a big fan of those programs that try to get kids involved with technology early. I think it's phenomenal. I'm really proud to be associated with an organization that's trying to spread its reach to the younger generation for free. Because, you know, cybersecurity is a lot more niche than programming is. You know, kids want to learn how to make video games, and we have a lot of, you know, hard, you know, tried and true ways of teaching that material. I mean, we have Scratch, which is a wonderful program from MIT, which is great for young children. You know, I got started on Mark Overmars' Game Maker, which is another fairly accessible tool to use. Definitely not as accessible as Scratch, but teaching cybersecurity to kids, I mean, that's like kind of hard to even explain. Like, what is cybersecurity? So the fact that they're trying to improve upon that is just phenomenal. I give them a lot of credit. Now, I actually forgot how to beat this boss, which is unfortunate. I mean, I know how to beat him, but I forget what weapon he's weak to, so this might take some trial and error. Okay. That looks somewhat... No, it doesn't look effective at all. Is it this? No. Is it... Okay, it must be... I don't know, but I'm seemingly doing an okay job. Of course, it's gonna jinx me. Okay, I think I'm doing a good enough job that I'm gonna use this. This is gonna add some fun time to chat in the moment, because I'm gonna have to build up my energy tanks in the next level, but I think it's worth it from a time perspective. Oh gosh. Phew! Hey Terrell, my program that I got started with is Mark Overmars' Game Maker. It's now called Yo-Yo Games' Game Maker. They got acquired, I think, in, I'm wanting to say 2007. There was a lot of controversy about that at first. A lot of people really didn't like it getting so corporate, you know. I don't want the man to tell me how to you know, make my games. It was a bunch of silly teenage stuff. But yeah, if you look up Game Maker Studio, I think that's the modern name of the platform. It used to have a really solid free version, and now I think you have to pay in order to use it, but I'm not positive about that. Don't quote me. I think they have a free trial though. I think they have a free trial, so definitely check that out. For younger folks who are less, you know, familiar with these concepts, I would definitely recommend Scratch as a great program. I taught that at ID Tech Camp to folks as young as 6 years old, and they really, really got into it. I actually have, I wonder if it's still up there, I have a Mega Man game engine that I wrote in Scratch just to demonstrate. Maybe I'll pull that up after the stream ends just for fun. Yeah, there's a lot of impressive things you can do with Mega Man, with Scratch, but it's a lot more approachable. Oh, I also have to mention this. I think it's called Day of Code. It's this major initiative that's sponsored by Obama was a sponsor of it, Bill Gates, I believe, a bunch of other folks. It's this day-long program, mostly for kids, that is so awesome for an introduction to programming. I could not recommend it enough. They also make it fun by making it themed by Plants vs. Zombies. I believe there's some levels associated with them and Angry Birds as well. Keep accidentally getting my wire tangled up with the desk. I'm fortunate enough to be playing with an original SNES controller. But yeah, those are two resources I would definitely, or three resources I would definitely plug in. And the language that they use for the Day of Code, I think it's very similar to Scratch if it's not identical to Scratch. Okay, so that's how you charge up your sub-tanks so that you can stand a chance against, I would argue, probably the only hard boss in the game. The only really hard boss in the game. Thanks for the question, though. It's been a while. I know that the dog should be pretty easy. As I say this as I'm getting completely whooped. Then Sigma Stage 2, I think, is pretty easy. And then Stage 3 is incredibly frustrating. Okay. Was this... Okay, I'm gonna chance it. But I think I'm doing well enough that... I really shouldn't have done that. You're definitely gonna have to watch me refill my sub-tanks in a little bit, because this is not boding well. In fact, I'm thinking about just giving up here, just so that I can, yeah. Just so that I only have one sub-tank to refill. Okay. Let's try that again. This is a great time, by the way, to ask questions or just conversate. This is a huge time burner, unfortunately. I'll try to get good for you all. Now, I will mention one thing that might be interesting to those who are trying to learn JavaScript. Do I have a... Okay, and awesome. Okay, cool. JavaScript... Oh, awesome. A free life. I really need that. So, JavaScript has a game engine that you can play around with called... what's it called? I think it's Phaser. Phaser's one of them. I don't know if that's the one I'm thinking of, but Phaser.js is one of the engines you can use to program games with JavaScript in your browser. So that's a lot of fun, and it's also pretty practical because the concepts, you know, translate over. A lot of people want to start by learning Unity. I am not a huge fan of Unity as a learning software. I think it's a great tool for professionals. But like to use it, you know, professionally, you need to know how to use the scripting language, and it's really not easy. From the little bit that I've done with it, I would not be a huge proponent of Unity for getting started. I think GameMaker is a much better learning tool. I think Scratch is an amazing learning tool. And if you want to be a professional game developer, Subpoint A, I probably wouldn't recommend it because it's a very competitive market and very hard to get into, and there's a lot less demand. But if you want to do it semi-professionally for fun, or just or you actually think you can get a career in it, it's certainly possible. People do it. Then you can get into Unity, but I would not start with Unity by any stretch of the means. Okay, I feel pretty good about this. I have 3 sub-tanks. I really, really should win this, but I'm sure I'll find a way to mess up. Okay, I'm pretty sure the only way to beat him is with charge shots. And by moving out of the way. Oh, this is awful. This is a terrible start. Does anybody mind looking up if he has any other weaknesses other than charge shots? I'm pretty sure I'm right, but if I'm doing this wrong, I'm definitely making this a lot harder on myself than I have to do. Okay, I must be misremembering. There has to be a way to beat him that's easier than this, because I was not this good at video games when I was a child. I think that maybe this works too? Okay, this works too. Alright, that explains everything. Oh, God. It would have been ideal if I found this out a little bit earlier, but I think I got it. I think I got it, folks. Phew! That's the game. Phew! I don't think I knew that trick when I was younger. I think that was the problem. I thought you had to beat him with a Mega Buster, but it's so much easier with the shield, whatever it's called, the Armored Armadillo shield. Phew, that was a lot of fun. So I'm gonna let the credits roll, and while I'm doing that, I'm gonna pull up that Scratch demo of Mega Man that I was talking to you about, so you can use that as a demonstration, maybe to inspire some younger folks to get into development. What was really adorable about that is on the Scratch website you can clone someone's project and work off of it, and you get to see all the different clones that are available, and there are a bunch of kids that made their own fan Mega Man characters, and it was really adorable, and I'm hopeful that that inspired someone to go somewhere with their career. That's what I live for. Let's see. So this is not mine, so someone else must have also done this. I wonder if this is a fork of mine. Let's see. Do-do-do. would you say it's harder to make a Mega Man style action platformer than a turn-based RPG style game in some of these engines? So I'll separate that into two different questions. In terms of which game is easier to make objectively, no question in my mind, RPGs are easier to make. And that's because predominantly there is an engine called RPG Maker that is really, really easy to use, and it's really built so that people will build stories much more so than building game engines. You don't build that many dynamic components there. So that's one thing. Now, in terms of the Game Maker engine proper, an RPG has quite a bit of things that you have to program. If you're building it from the ground up, you have to think about random number generation. You have to think about text dialogues, etc. So if you're going to make an RPG, I'd probably recommend RPG Maker. If you want to make something else, I would recommend probably Game Maker. But Game Maker is pretty complicated in terms of handling gravity and the like. So that's one of the big things when it comes to doing a platformer is getting gravity physics to feel natural. It's not easy. Okay, I finally found this. I'll show it after the credits finish rolling. It got viewed 37,000 times in the past 7 years. That's awesome. And it got, if someone made their own version, is that what this means? I think it got 224 remixes, which is pretty cool. But yeah, one big thing that would happen if you do a platformer is it's all too common that when you make a platforming game, that when you handle the gravity, oftentimes the gravity will send you through the ground. And that's something that's really tricky to deal with, is dealing with boundaries. You can see a lot of examples of games where the boundaries are not finally defined and you can get out of bounds. It's really difficult to deal with. So I would definitely say an RPG is objectively easier to make, but make whatever is interesting to you. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing that I would say about a new developer is you should not be making something with the intention of it being good. I'll just be honest with you. You should not make something with the intention of it being good, because it probably won't be outside of, you know, maybe your friends and family will appreciate it, certainly. But I'll tell you, the first 12 games that I made, they were terrible. They were objectively terrible. But I learned so much from that process, and that's what it's all about, is build something that's fun for you to build, and that will inspire you to keep building. That's the most important thing, is always keep coding, always build things, put things on GitHub, learn a lot from the process. That's what it's all about. It's not about building something valuable out of the gate. It simply isn't. So that's one thing I would definitely stress to folks. I will give the credits a little bit more time, because there might be a little Easter egg that happens if you wait a little bit longer, which I wouldn't want to deprive you all of. Oh, and there it is. Right on cue. All right, so closing that out. And really quickly, I will show you the Mega Man game engine that I built a while ago in case you'd like to check it out in Scratch. It's not anything particularly impressive, but it is something that can get you started to show that Scratch, an engine that was built for, you know, literal children to do fairly basic things, can go quite some way. I mean, I probably spent a couple days on this, really not much more. And I have running animation, jumping, sound effects. I have a health engine that I can set, I believe. I can set my health to, let's say, 30. I don't know what the health range is, so that might have been more than my bar can represent. bars here. So yeah, this is a fun little project I created with Scratch related to Mega Man. I also created a game called, or I created the beginning of a game called Mega Man Battle Network Online. I never finished it, but this was an example of me creating something with Phaser.js and with modern networking. Like, the shame is that the hard stuff's all done. The stuff that people would generally say is difficult is completely done. I programmed all these chips. I programmed a bunch of logic for your gameplay. The server works. You can play with 2 people. It's just that there's really no graphics. There's not a lot of functionality, etc. So the good news about these open source things, such as the one I just showed you, the Mega Man engine on Scratch, and then this on GitHub, is that you can read all the code. You can do whatever you want with that code, and that can be, a great place to start. Now, I would not say if you're a new programmer to start with, an online video game. That's not necessarily basic, but you can use this as a reference. So I have a GitHub repository as well. I should probably link that on my my social here. You can check out some of the projects that I've worked on, including those 2, if you want to get some influence, if you want to be influenced from it and inspired from it, hopefully, and use it to build your own stuff. So I think with that, I'm going to wrap and upload this to my YouTube channel. So Mega Man X, phenomenal game. I have the other 2 games, and I'd love to play them as well. Especially Mega Man X3, because this is actually a pretty rare cartridge right here, because they made a PS1 version, as well as the Super Nintendo version. So yeah, I'd love to do this again sometime. I'm hoping to do a Link's Awakening stream next weekend. That should be a little bit longer than this one. Hope to play the other Mega Mans at some point and play some online chess. If there's a huge demand for me to play Fortnite, I'll learn how to play it. I have absolutely no idea how to play it. I've never played it once. Thank you so much for taking the time once again on a Saturday to learn a little bit about technology and watch me play video games. It means a lot, and I hope to do this again soon. You all have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care. Enjoy the weekend.